It's important to note that even though CDC and OSHA has now put out guidelines for meat processing plants, they just came out yesterday. Why did they wait so long? I don't know. But they did put out these guidelines as of yesterday, and the guidelines are purely voluntary. The Trump administration could make these CDC guidelines for meat processing plants. It could make them mandatory. The Department of Labor could just tell meatpacking plants these guidelines are required, you have to follow them. But they're not doing that. And so these are just a suggestion. Except, interestingly, in one plant in the whole country. In Missouri, a really innovative lawsuit was filed against Smithfield, one of these big companies that runs these big plants, filed by an anonymous long-term employee at that plant. She's just identified in the legal filings as Jane Doe. And Jane Doe, in her lawsuit against Smithfield, alleges that people at the plant she works at have been working while sick. They've been working without protective equipment. There's a whole host of alleged irresponsible behavior by the plant that this employee is suing to correct. She is, interestingly, not suing for damages. She is just suing to try to force the plant to make the plant safe for its employees. And this case in Missouri against Smithfield is ongoing, but the federal judge overseeing that case today did rule that henceforth the plant must comply with guidelines from the CDC and OSHA. So the CDC and OSHA took until yesterday to come up with guidelines for these plants. The Trump administration says those guidelines are just a suggestion, not mandatory for any other meatpacking plant in the country. But in Missouri, thanks to the order of one federal judge, this Smithfield plant is mandated to follow those guidelines at least one of their plants. Start somewhere. And God bless you and keep you, Mrs. Jane Doe. Thank you for what you've done. Smithfield is also the company that operates that huge plant in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, that has produced one of the largest COVID outbreaks anywhere in the country. There's now over 1,000 cases in Sioux Falls, South Dakota associated with that one plant. They still don't have a statewide stay-at-home order in South Dakota. There's also nearly 1,000 COVID cases in Grand Island, Nebraska. Nebraska is another state where they don't have a statewide stay-at-home order. In Grand Island, Nebraska, that outbreak, too, appears to have originated with a meat packing plant in town, a JBS beef plant. That's the nucleus of what's becoming a pretty worrying outbreak in Nebraska as a state. Nebraska had 2,000 confirmed coronavirus cases Thursday last week. As of yesterday, as of Sunday, they have over 3,000 cases. That's not a good projection. But again, no stay-at-home order in Nebraska. And a major campaign donor to Nebraska Governor Pete Ricketts is back on his idea that he is going to open up the gigantic Nebraska Crossing Mall on Interstate 80 just outside Omaha by the end of this week. Sure, Nebraska just went from 2,000 cases on Thursday to 3,000 on Sunday, and they've got 1,000 cases plus in one pretty small city associated with a meatpacking plant that the governor wants to reopen. Why not get everybody breathing in each other's faces as quickly as possible? When Trump Labor Secretary Eugene Scalia decided that he would not make the health guidelines for meatpacking plants mandatory, I don't know if he thought that might mean that these outbreaks would stay inside the plants and not turn into big outbreaks in the communities where those workers live. But what we're seeing, where we have big outbreaks in meat processing plants all over the country, is that they're turning into big community outbreaks in all of those places. We're seeing that everywhere now. For example, there's a very worrying situation tonight in Logansport, Indiana. The county there, Cass County, Indiana, this morning announced a new public health emergency in their county because of a really big spike in cases there centered on a local Tyson meat processing plant. I mean, this is their total cases in Cass County, Indiana over time. This is not that is not a good trend line. This is the growth in cases in Cass County, Indiana, day by day. Again, not good, not a good trend line. They have closed that Tyson plant in Cass County, Indiana. But today, with the case numbers in that one county topping 1,000, the CEO of the local Logansport Memorial Hospital said, quote, "Our hospital is not equipped with enough staff or resources to care for numbers like this." And so that county in Indiana has put in place a new state of emergency and a stricter stay-at-home order than what is in place statewide.